had left off at Louis the 18th. We had left off with the Charter of 1814 and with the Restoration here, and all the way down to the First Treaty of Paris. You may highlight the word first here. It's going to be different, or especially important to understand the difference between the First Treaty of Paris and the Second Treaty of Paris. The First Treaty of Paris is going to be pretty easygoing on the French, okay? When Louis XVIII refuses to pay the money back to the other, our big four, they're going to let him slide with it because he is going to shrink France down to the same size that it had once been. He's going to stop that threat of Napoleon's expansionism, okay? And Napoleon will be exiled to the island of Elba. And he's even given a wage for his military service while he's there. But we have Napoleon out of the picture. We have Louis XVIII, who is the Bourbon back on the throne. And we have our First Treaty of Paris ending all of these Napoleonic wars. Okay? So the Quadruple Alliance had then agreed after this First Treaty of Paris to meet in Vienna to work out a general peace settlement. Okay? So they've put the terms of the war into the Treaty of Paris. They've established that a Bourbon is back on the throne. And now our Quadruple Alliance is going to meet in Vienna to decide what the balance of power should be in Europe. Okay? This is for that essential question number 3. I can identify to what extent the balance of power was maintained in Europe by 1815. So the Congress of Vienna is going to meet from September of 1814 to June of 1815. Representative powers from all of the major nations in Europe are going to be there, including France. France is invited, okay, because France has went into the First Treaty of Paris. They are still a power in Europe. They just want to make sure they're not going to be too much of a power. And so they all meet to redraw the territorial lines in Europe and try to restore the social and political order of the ancient regime. So they want to restore the borders as they were pre-French Revolution. The other nations are worried that France got a little bit carried away here and has taken on too much territory, and this could tip that balance of power in Europe. So, yeah, they want to go back to the territorial possessions that were in place before the French Revolution. Before the French had gotten all crazy with the revolution and Napoleon had come and started to conquer lands and take part of Italy. They want to go back to the historical size of France. So our big four are going to be Austria, England, Prussia, and Russia. Okay, Austria, England, Prussia, and Russia. Do you have your 5.2 packet?
Oh. Where did we get them?
Last week? I have some.
Oh, is it this one?
It says Napoleonic era.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have it.
And so our big four, Austria, England, Prussia, and Russia, we're on page 12. Clemens von Metternich, which is fun to say, get all that throaty sound in there, is going to be our gentleman here on the right. You'll probably see this portrait the most often, so he's the gentleman on the right-hand side of the screen. He represents Austria, and he comes into this conference, the Congress of Vienna, very conservative, okay? He epitomizes what the conservative side is going to look like in this meeting. And by conservative, I mean that he wants legitimate monarchies, aristocracies, and established churches to be put back in place. He wants to return to the old order of things. He is going to want to put the old monarchies back on the throne. He opposed the ideas of the liberals, and we're going to talk about the liberals here in a little bit, and reformers, because he believed that the impact of the liberals are going to damage the Habsburg Empire. Okay, so he's very conservative. He epitomizes old Europe. He wants the old regimes back. He wants the old monarchs put back on their thrones. England is represented by a gentleman called Lord Castlereagh, and he seeks a balance of power by surrounding France with larger and stronger states, which we're going to see. So he's going to say it's not so much the monarch you put on the throne. We need to divide up the land around France. If you think about the European map now, and one of the reasons France seems to get itself into some military trouble, World War I, World War II, they are surrounded by those who are usually not their allies, so they always end up fighting a pretty spread out war. So they're going to have all of this territory sandwiched in that Austria, Prussia, Russia are going to kind of agree on, taking back some of those territorial lands. And that's Castlebrau is going to call that limiting their power through geography. Okay? Prussia is going to seek to recover Prussian territory lost to Napoleon that we talked about during the Napoleonic Wars and gain additional territory in northern Germany or Saxony. And then we have good old Tsar Alexander I, who Napoleon had gone after, who had angered him by having to, remove his troops. Alexander is going to represent Russia, and he wants to demand a free and independent Poland with who else as its king but himself. Okay, and so these are kind of our major picking points. This is what each nation or each representative is wanting going into the Congress of Vienna. Yes?
So basically the only reason Alexander is there is because of Poland, which the Poland conquered?
Yes.
So he could care less about the rest of France as long as he Poland?
Yes. He wants that territory, he wants a buffer. So he wants Poland. Which is, we're going to see that Poland isn't going to be a pawn in a lot of our upcoming conflicts. Yes, sir.
So does he want to absorb Poland into the Russian Empire, or just have it as a separate state, but he's the king?
Separate, free and independent,
Yeah.
but he wants to be the king of it. So he would be over all that territory. What do the Polish want? They are nationalistic now. They want to keep their identity. He just wants to be able to say he's the king over both.
Okay.
Yeah,
And he's
but not
like a
incorporate
buffer
into
zone
Russia.
towards the rest of Europe?
What?
You kind of want like a buffer zone between Western Europe?
Yes, and also to extend his power into Western Europe. But he knows that the Russians aren't, with all this nationalism, remember we said Napoleon sparks nationalism? One of our MAIN reasons for World War I, main reasons, is in and main is nationalism. We're going to have militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism are the four main causes. Four main causes of World War I. Nationalism. People start to be like, whoa, 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 my nation better. And we're going to have an argument here at the Congress of Vienna. Is nationalism about your ethnicity, or is it by the monarch you live under? Which should you get into? And so now that we've had all these conquerings, there's ethnicity mixed up in a lot of these places, so it's going to become a problem. So good foreshadowing. Thank you, Brandy. France, as I said, will later become involved in the negotiations or deliberations, and they're represented by Talleyrand, and the French, who's the French foreign minister at this time. And this is what becomes known as the time of the Dancing Congress. Okay, and that is because the Congress of Vienna is held amid much pageantry. Okay, this is old nobles coming back together. These are the old monarchs of Europe. And so there is just all kinds of parties, balls, and banquets. Instead of these men being what they probably should have been doing the whole time, meeting to decide some of the biggest issues of Europe, they're putting on the pleasantries of the old noble class. Okay, they're used to those customs. And the goal of this, or the intention of this dancing congress, was to generate favorable public opinion, to show that they could all be present together, that they were working to bring a peaceful, they can be peaceful together in a ballroom, we can have a peaceful Europe, to generate favorable public opinion and occupy the delegates, since they had little to do of any serious nature. We've already had the first Treaty of Paris. We've already redrawn the lines. We already have a Bourbon back on the throne. All they're going to discuss is how to keep the balance of power. They don't have a war to end at this time. So, they have a lot of time on their hands. And this is kind of where, I don't know if you've ever heard the statement that nursery rhymes are the world's oldest political cartoons. This is where we kind of get the terminology for Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. All the king's horses and all the king's men had to put Humpty back together again. Humpty is Europe. Okay, Humpty Dumpty is Europe, and they all have to meet to put it back together. Just like Georgie Porges was with the pie, stuck his fingers in the pie. He was just known for being a ladies' man. And then we have trying to think of another one. I have a whole list of them. I'll print them out for you. But back before there were political cartoons, King George II was and then what's the one? I want to think. In the corner, little Jack Horner's in the corner. Yeah. So I'll produce the printout of you. It's pretty interesting. In my graduate year of college, the professor started the whole year out because it was this era, more modern Europe on. Because Modern Europe was the name of the class. He started with the world's oldest political cartoons, and they're all old nursery rhymes we had as kids. So it was kind of interesting. So here's Humpty Dumpty equals Europe. We're putting it back together again.
Nowhere in the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhymes does it say Humpty Dumpty was an egg.
Yeah,
So
no.
why is E and A, like, why do they want to
With
read
eggs
that?
break. Eggs
Yeah,
break
eggs break.
easily.
But can you put them?
I don't know. Did
All the
they?
king's horses, all the king's men, because the Humpty back together.
Yeah. I mean, because they didn't really. Because we're gonna have World War I, we're gonna have World War II, and we're gonna have the problems we have today.
HD,
I'll pull those up when we're at the end today because I do have them all typed up from my college class. But so back down to how are they going to try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again? We're going to have 3 principles of settlement. These are 3 principles that our big 4 come in with that they want to get accomplished. Okay. The 3 principles of settlement. The first one is legitimacy. Legitimacy means that you bring the powers that were pre-Napoleon back to the throne. Okay, that you are going to bring back our original rulers. And this is our first principle of settlement. It means returning the power of the ruling families deposed by more than 2 decades of revolutionary warfare. So they want to. The Bourbons are one. We've had, some stress on the Habsburg Empire. All the nepotism that Napoleon had. I mean, we had Joseph and Catherine and Louis. All of his family placed on the thrones of where he conquered. They want to return the original pre-revolutionary rulers back to those thrones. So the Bourbons were restored in France, Spain, and Naples. Dynasties were restored in Holland, Sardinia, Tuscany, and Modena. And the Papal States were returned to the Pope. Okay, so we're having a return to pre-revolutionary ruling families. So that is our first principle of settlement. This is the first thing they want to do. Legitimacy. Legitimate heir to the throne. They are returning the legitimate heirs. Second principle of settlement is compensation. This means to territorially reward those states which have made considerable sacrifices to defeat Napoleon. So if you had stood up against Napoleon and lost your troops or lost lives in your kingdom and your nation, you should be rewarded with territory, and this is called compensation, and the second principle of the settlement. England will receive naval bases, Malta, Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, Cape of Good Hope. Yes, ma'am.
They try to do the exact same thing with like slaves in America, like giving them compensation for like their ancestors being slaves or like their ancestors landing.
And Native Americans.
Yeah.
My family was marched along the Trail of Tears, and so the land that was in Georgia that was taken from them, there's, they send you these letters about the money that could be yours. My dad just was boots and back, but
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't marching on the Trail of Tears.
What's
But
that word you said? If they did something good, they could get land?
compensation.
That's today.
Did they,
Oh,
did they did that with Hitler?
what?
Did they with Hitler? though?
With Hitler, they're going to do the opposite. They're going to take away from Hitler for blaming him for World War II.
I thought
Like,
like when you started grabbing land and stuff, for Poland, they was doing it.
appeasement. That's appeasement. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you said Ceylon was in Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Okay, so but that's in Southeast Asia, isn't it?
Sri Lanka? Yeah, yeah. Is it ports? They're getting ports here. Not like the whole area, but ports. Malta Island, that England had refused to give up in the Mediterranean, which had conflicted with the treaty. Cape of Good Hope on Africa. So all those places that you need to stop to refuel your boat. So I'm not talking like they're giving the whole name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Austria will recover the Italian province of Lombardy and was awarded adjacent Venetia as well as Galicia from Poland and the Illyrian provinces along the Adriatic. Okay, so we just have a lot of territory being turned over. People are rewarded for standing up to Napoleon. Russia will be given most of Poland, which is why Alexander I, of course, wants to be the king, because they're going to be given most of Poland, with the Tsar as the king, as well as Finland, and modern-day Moldova and western Ukraine. Prussia will be awarded the Rhineland and 3/5 of Saxony and part of Poland, and Sweden will receive Norway. I do not expect you to memorize all of these territorial exchanges. I do expect you to remember that compensation was the second principle of settlement. There's going to be 3. They're numbered in order here, that this is what the terms of the Congress of Vienna, this is what they're coming to agree upon. And the third principle of settlement is balance of power. This is arranging a map of Europe so that never again could one state, namely France, ever upset the balance of international order and cause a general war.
LOL.
Okay, yeah. LOL, but I mean, Congress of Vienna is actually going to do a better job than most of the peace treaties we have coming out of the more modern wars. It's going to hold it for quite some time, but we're going to have that same problem, militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism that aren't going to go away. Okay, and I'm going to turn this backlight on, and I hope you guys can still see. You might have to play with the windows. Is anybody else hot?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so we will just have to figure it out. I mean, you have it typed in your notes, so please let me know if I get to one you can't see, and we'll do what we can. All right, so 1, 2, 3, balance of power. As I said, arrange the map of Europe so that never again one state could upset the international order. Namely France. They're like, oh, France, you caused this problem. So we need to make sure that you are isolated, that you are separated, that you can no longer do this. So encirclement of France was achieved through the following. They're going to strengthen the Netherlands. Okay, we're going to strengthen the Netherlands here. We're going to unite the Austrian Netherlands, Belgium with Holland to form the Kingdom of the United Netherlands north of France. So we're going to strengthen to the north of France. And then Prussia is going to receive the Rhinish lands bordering on the eastern French frontier, the left bank of the Rhine. Okay, and so we're going to have our increased powers here. We are also going to have Switzerland receiving a guarantee of perpetual neutrality, which is, I think, totally ironic. So this is where we get there. So we're going to get Switzerland with perpetual neutrality. So this hems France in. And you can technically call this the end of the Holy Roman Empire. See this dark line outlining here? This is going to be kind of left of what was the Holy Roman Empire that we'd seen so expansive in our map. But you can call this really the demise of the Holy Roman Empire right here. The end of the Habsburg Holy Roman Empire, I should say.
Yeah, let's say, was
Yeah.
that Holy Roman Emperor at this time that was any important?
We had the Austrian emperor, which is going to be placed back, but very limited power after being during Napoleon's reign. So the Austrian Habsburg still exists, but it's a unified power. The Habsburg Holy Roman Empire is pretty much at its end. Okay, we're not going to speak too much about it. What?
How do you balance out power like that? You know, Russia's pretty big, and you know, Britain didn't have a lot of territory throughout the world.
Well, we're not looking at imperialism as much right now. British had just lost North America, so they're not. It's when we turn to colonization in Africa that we're going to start to see people butting heads again. When we get Industrial Revolution, which is our next unit, and we start to need more resources, that's where we're going to start to see some problems. Right now, kind of trying to get back to the status quo. So, the end of the Habsburg Holy Roman Empire, we've enhanced Austrian influence over German states by taking that land that Napoleon had put together as the Confederate States of Germany, and we're going to turn that into the German Confederation of 39 states out of the original 300. So one thing that stays the same from Napoleon to now is that Germany is going to be, we've said, what had stopped Germany from unifying? Why were there 300 different little states in Germany?
The active background.
After the what?
I said the background, like there's different rulers and people.
Okay, why were all these different rulers and people? What time period did we study for a really long time that impacted Germany a lot? After medieval? The Protestant Reformation. So we are still separated from there. And so the one thing that Napoleon and the French Revolution do is it's going to cause Germany to unify, now from 300 down to 39 states, with the Austrian designated as president of the Diet or Assembly of the Confederation. This maintains Napoleon's reorganization. This is something that stays the same. Okay, they're pretty anti-Napoleon, but they keep this part the same. The loose confederation where members remained virtually sovereign, so we still have sovereignty between the different states or confederation of the Germans. Sardinia or Piedmont had its former territory restored with the addition of Genoa, and a compromise on Poland was reached. Congress Poland, created with Alexander I of Russia as king, will last for 15 years. Okay, so balance of power. Only Britain, so good looking ahead there, Kyler. Only Britain remained as a growing power, and they will begin, you want to highlight, circle this. This is our 100 years of world leadership from 1814 to 1914, pretty much from this time up to World War I. Britain is going to have, you know, its greatest, its time of power or world leadership.
So is it this golden age or?
I wouldn't as much use the term as golden age applicable here, but it's dominant age. Yeah, it's dominant age. We're going to have the Industrial Revolution. We're going to have, it is our power. World leadership from this time. We're going to come back to this in Unit 7, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. But we do need to come back because Mr. Napoleon, savvy little man, is not done yet. March 20th through June 22nd, 1815 is going to become a time period known after it ends, of course, as the 100 Days. Napoleon is going to capitalize on these dancing Congress members. They are there for a year just to discuss these 3 points of settlement, okay? Lots of balls, lots of dancing, lots of merriment. He is going to take advantage of this stalled or this delayed talk at Vienna, and he is going to make his way, leave Elba, because he's been put there with money, with his own troops. He's not there alone on the island, and he is going to mobilize and find his way back to France. So the 100 Days begin on March 1st, 1815, when Napoleon lands in the south of France and marches with large-scale popular support into Paris, okay, because he was very popular. How many parts of the state had he gotten to be loyal to him that we saw him? Like all of them, yeah, through all of his reforms. So he was very popular still, although militarily he had been a little bit on the downside at the end. He will seize power from Louis XVIII, who will promptly flee Paris because he knows what happens to kings when, you know, they are kicked off their throne. Yeah, yeah, he's like, peace, I'm out, I'm not, you know, it's Napoleon. So Napoleon will then raise an army and then defeat a Prussian army in Belgium on June 16th of 1815. This is the point where Napoleon is going to start to see that he may be back on his rise, like he's going to try to reinitiate his rule here. But what's going to happen is where he's going to encounter a battle called the Battle of Waterloo. The Quadruple Alliance wants him put down, okay? They do not have any trust in Napoleon. He upsets the balance of Europe. They want to put him down. And so what happens on June 1815 in Belgium at the Battle of Waterloo, which will be the last battle of the Napoleonic Wars. It's considered the last because it will be Napoleon's last battle. Napoleon was defeated in Waterloo, Belgium by England's army led by the Duke of Wellington and Prussian forces, okay, that are now pushing back. There's not much more I need to say about the Battle of Waterloo here except for that it was the last of Napoleon's battles. From this battle, he will be taken, and instead of being exiled to Elba this time, he will be exiled to St. Helena, which is much farther away. It's off the coast of Africa. Okay, so they're like, okay, you're not getting out of this. We put you, you know, in the Mediterranean. We're putting you all the way out on the coast of Africa, now off the coast of Africa. And he will die there in 1821. We think probably of stomach cancer or a stomach condition that had been going on for quite some time. So he will die in exile. And this is where we get, and you'll want to highlight the word second, this is where we get the Second Treaty of Paris, okay? The Second Treaty of Paris comes in 1815, and so you remember our essential question up here. So we're in 1815, essential question 3. To what extent was the balance of power maintained in Europe by 1815? This is where we are, the Second Treaty of Paris. Allies will now deal harshly with France. Highlight the word harshly. How were they to them in the First Treaty of Paris? Yeah, nice. Like, okay, you don't want to pay money back. A Bourbon's back on the throne. It's okay. You know, you can come to the Congress of Vienna and you can talk to. It's okay. You can dance. Yeah, you can dance if you want to. So the Second Treaty of Paris, 1815, the Allies now dealt harshly with France in subsequent negotiations. Okay. Minor changes of the frontiers previously agreed to were put in place. So the changes to the frontiers that we just outlined in that whole Congress of Vienna, those are going to stay. A couple minor changes that we don't even need to mention. France will now have to pay an indemnity for the loss of life, okay? And so they're going to say you have to pay for all the loss of life from the start of the French Revolution and any acts against the other nations. What?
How much is a life? Like,
well, you can't put a price on a life, but they're gonna plop it out there, okay? I don't know, we'd have to take the death divided by what, 7 million and decide what they decided life was worth, but it's like life and land. I'm sure a peasant's life wasn't as worth as a, officer's life, but yeah. Okay? So that's where we're going to end with kind of those foreign affair relations right here. We're going to come back and talk about some of this. I'm going to hit on the concert of Europe in a second. But I want to evaluate Napoleon's rule really quickly with you. And this is good study material for an evaluation, especially if you got an FRQ or something about Napoleon in evaluating his rule. So was it good or was it bad? Okay? I think you could go both ways. And so we're going to kind of sort through what we learned about Napoleon. And then we're going to move on to the concert of Europe and what stage we're setting for our next units. So he was the first egalitarian dictatorship of modern times. Okay, that's pretty impressive. He had his good points.
Really mean egalitarian dictatorship.
Egalitarian, he gave equal rights to most of his citizens. He gave the education, religious freedom, all of these things. So he gave all of these things to everyone, but he was a dictator. Yeah, because they didn't get a representation in voting for it.
Okay.
His positive achievements, revolutionary institutions were consolidated. We saw the Napoleonic Code and all of his reforms being successful. Thoroughly centralized the French government with the Napoleonic Code, again, the central bank, the Concordat of 1801. Made lasting settlement with the church, which was within that Concordat of 1801, that brought the Roman Catholic Church back into France and made appeasement with the Pope. He spread positive achievements of French Revolution to the rest of Europe. Remember, he was like, oh, I'm so successful at home. My domestic stuff is rocking. I'm going to go out and conquer the rest of Europe and be a liberator. But some of the reforms he brought to the places he conquered were actually good. The end of serfdom. Okay, the end of some really unfair treatment of our lower classes. Impact on other countries, so that moves right into this. Serfdom ended in much of Germany by 1807. That's going to be significant to Germany's economy and its political situation as we move forward. Germany will be reorganized into 39 states again. Germany was 300 states. We may not have had the Germany that was consolidated into growing into a world power up to World War I without Napoleon and the French Revolution. So you can just, imagine. Prussia and Austria, for self-preservation, will reform their military and provide some reforms. And so they're going to react to the revolutionary ideas that Napoleon brings in. Liability. So here's our negatives. Okay, and these are pretty laid out for you. We've talked about them. He repressed individual liberty. Okay, through Napoleon's police state, he repressed individual liberty. As a group, you had it, but you were watched and you were meant to do what you were meant to do. Women are not going to have equal rights. He subverted republicanism, no elected government. Okay, no representation, and that's what the French have been out for. He oppressed conquered peoples throughout Europe. He was a conqueror, not a liberator. No matter how much he wanted to have liberator written at the bottom of his portraits, he was a conqueror. Okay, and he treated those people as if they were conquered. He caused terrific suffering as a result of war. Okay, the Napoleonic Wars were costly life and country and money. So those are the negatives. So, you can argue back and forth. Was there more positive? Was there more negative? And so the last topic we need to talk about before we evaluate the French Revolution as a whole is the concert of Europe. And this is going to bring us into our more modern era. How do we leave Europe after the French Revolution? How do we leave it after Napoleon? What happens after the Congress of Vienna? Okay? So we're going to hit this also in Unit 7, so I'm going to go pretty quickly here. Because we'll have to come back to all of this as we move into modern Europe. So how do you make sure that all of this stuff of the Congress of Vienna continues? How do you make sure it's enforced? And that is our concert of Europe. The Concert of Europe 1815 to 1848 will include arrangements to guarantee enforcement of the status quo as defined by the Vienna Settlement. So remember those three ideals of settlement, okay? The balance of power, the legitimacy, bringing all of that back. How are we going to maintain it? It was highly conservative in nature. So at this point, our conservative parties have won. Okay, the ones that say that we need to return to the status quo as it was before the revolution. So our quadruple alliance, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain, are going to provide for concerted action to put down any threat to the peace or balance of power. Okay, they're going to provide action to put down any threat to the peace or balance of power. So they will step in if someone gets out of line. If there's another Napoleon that rises, they will step in. France was usually seen as the possible violator of the Vienna settlement. So they make a rule that no Bonaparte shall ever again govern France. Okay, they're going to try to keep that mentality out of the French throne. Austria believed concerted action meant that the great powers defending the status quo as an established at Vienna against any change or threat to the system. So liberalism and nationalism will now be seen as threats to the existing order. You may want to highlight that, okay, because we're going to have some growing nationalism and liberalism as we move into our modern society. The Congress system of 1815 to 1822 is going to be our European international relations. We're controlled by a series of meetings held by great powers to monitor and defend the status quo. So they will continue to meet. Are these borders being kept? Are these regulations being followed? Are the indemnities being paid? The principle of collective security required unanimity among members of the Quadruple Alliance. So they're going to have to all agree all the time. So we're going to see our big four go down to our big three because Britain is going to eventually bow out. Britain's interests are not going to coincide with Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Okay, we know they're very different. And so we're going to end up with Austria, Prussia, and Russia on one side, Britain out isolated on its own, and France still kind of left to be the violators, okay? Our evaluation of the Concert of Europe. Congress of Vienna had been criticized for ignoring liberal and nationalistic aspirations of Europeans. This is important. There are people who want to change the conservative nature of the Congress of Vienna. And those are going to be the liberals and the nationalists. Yet the Congress of Vienna may have been more successful in stabilizing the international system than those in the 20th century. This is the stabilizing force that is going to take us from 1815 to World War I. Not until the unification of Germany in 1870 to 1871 was the balance of power in Europe upset. So what Napoleon put in motion will be what upsets this balance. It will not be France, it will be Germany that will upset the balance, and they're going to want their own piece of the pie. They've spent a long time as little divided states, and they're going to want to express their power as we move forward. And not until World War I did Europe have another general war. So in terms of peace treaties, the Congress of Vienna, although it was very conservative, although there wasn't a lot of work to be done by the members to put it together, it's one of our longer lasting treaties. Okay, it's going to hold us until World War I. This is going to be the Holy Alliance of Tsar Alexander I of Russia as well. We're going to come back to him in Unit 7, but it's hard not to mention them here as we move forward in history. He proposed for all monarchs to sign a statement agreeing to uphold Christian principles of charity and peace throughout Europe. All are going to sign except the Pope, the Sultan, and Britain.
Why won't the Pope sign?
Because the Pope isn't going to want to support the Protestant religions at this time. He's going to have the Catholic interests at heart. And so this is going to cause some problems because Alexander's actually trying to unify his lands by allowing some of that religious toleration that we saw through Napoleon. But we're going to see nationalism and imperialism rising, and national identity, unfortunately, is going to be in some countries still very related to religion. Like, we are a Catholic country. We are a Protestant country. Because England is kind of off. They don't, it's Alexander the First, and they've split with Russia. They don't agree on all of this balancing, and they're going off on their own. And so they're not going to sign because they're not part of that quadruple alliance anymore.
And where is the Sultan from?
Whereas the Sultan is going to be from what is like going to be our Ottomanish Empire.
Like in Aladdin.
The term like from Aladdin, yeah, but for a ruler. It'll be changed to a caliph later. But so if you think about where the Ottoman Empire existed up until end of World War I, going into World War II. I know. We didn't have wall maps in here when I moved in.
Wasn't it that the last time the Cubs won a World Series, the Ottoman Empire was still around?
Yep, the
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire did exist the last time the Cubs won a World Series. That is true. So, French Revolution evaluated. I said I put some valuable study materials in here. This is the end of it, guys. This is going to evaluate everything we've talked about. So, this is our analysis. This is our wrap-up. Results of the Revolution. What would you need to know about the French Revolution? How can you evaluate it? Results. The old social system, the estates 1, 2, and 3 are gone. They're destroyed and replaced with a new one based on equality, ability, and the law. Okay, so we've gotten rid finally of that feudalistic system in France. Guaranteed triumph of capitalism here. Mercantilism's out. People want to have the right to make their money their own way without government regulation. Gave birth to the notion of secular democracy, that we can have a government without religion involved, okay? Without a state religion. We can have a majority religion, like Napoleon said, but not a state religion. Did America do it first? And God, we try. It's going to become that a little bit more later. They keep it separate, but remember, we're still working out the very same Enlightenment ideals. So this time period, yes, moving forward. I would say more though, America didn't really start out as rooted in this state religion, or they came over for religious freedom. Most of our immigrants. So I would say that it was a bigger deal for those French people who were. This is a Catholic state. You will be, pushed out. If you're in Spain, especially, we will kill you if you are not Catholic. It'd be a bigger deal in Europe. Gave birth to notion of secular democracy. I said laid foundations for establishment of modern nation state. Here's our nation states. Here's nationalism on the rise. Going to be really important. We talked about when we started the French Revolution that some modern historians have challenged the traditional view of the origins of the French Revolution. Some argue that key sections of the nobility were liberal, and that others will point out that nobility and the bourgeoisie were not necessarily economic rivals. Okay, so remember that argument between traditional and revisionist historians? That may be something that would be mentioned on an AP exam. What's the traditional view of the French Revolution? What's the revisionist view? Traditional view, it was a class conflict. Revisionist view, it wasn't that they didn't have that much in common. They were actually very similar. They just both wanted to get rid of the king. Okay, so remember there's a difference. Historians have traditionally concluded, however, that the French Revolution ended in failure. Because it didn't set out, failure meaning it didn't set out to accomplish all of the goals that it began with, all of the Enlightenment ideals. Remember, Napoleon will actually bring more of the revolutionary ideals in than the revolution had ended with. But the revolution can be seen as having numerous successes. Even though overall we see it as a failure for what it set out to first accomplish, it did have successes along the way. After the fall of crazy Robespierre, we will have a solid middle class with a liberal philosophy, and an Enlightenment worldview will be able to reassert itself after the Reign of Terror. Under the Directory, they were able to salvage a good portion of social and political gains that the peasantry had made between 1789 and 1791. The old pattern of separate legal orders and absolute monarchy will never be reestablished, so they were able to get rid of that traditional Bourbon monarchy. Although Louis XVIII will be put back on, it will not be. Remember, he has to put a legislature in place when he comes back. Napoleon will build on the policies of the Directory and add support of old nobility in the church to that of the middle class and the peasantry. Big deal there. Napoleon is able to almost associate every class of Frenchmen into loyalty of the state. Okay, so that's a success, I would definitely say. Promoted reconciliation of old and new orders. Centralized the government. Opens careers up to talent, or meritocracy as we talked about last time. And it forced Louis XVIII to accept French society based on wealth and achievement. Okay, and you could achieve these things through meritocracy. And so it opens up this new realm for individuals in France. It granted representatives government and civil liberties. And the core of the French Revolution thus survived a generation of war and dictatorship. So overall, most historians would say, failure. But we can't deny that there's a whole laundry list of successes in there. Okay, and so if you'll look at your FRQ, that is going to be your out-of-class writing, our first essay for the semester, you will see that your question is to identify the grievances of the groups that made up the Third Estate in France on the eve of the French Revolution and analyze to the extent to which one of these groups was able to address its grievances in the period from 1789 to 1799. So it's what were their problems with it and what did they get done? Okay?
Wait, what was the first part?
To identify the grievances of the groups that made up the Third Estate in France on the eve of the French Revolution. Okay, so it's pretty much what were their problems? What did they get done? What was that success by the end? Okay, so this will be really valuable to you here in the end. So how did the French Revolution embody the ideas of the Enlightenment, or how was it an enlightened revolution? Scientific and rational thought led to a desire for political reform, which is how the revolution started in the beginning. Progress in all fields, including government, was seen as necessary and possible, and political science could be based on natural laws. The economy, too, will be made more rational through the ending of international barriers to trade. And so if you get a question on an exam that says, how was the revolution enlightened, you would want to be able to describe each of these. Phase 1, the age of Montesquieu, is definitely enlightened. It is based on the spirit of the laws by Montesquieu, is why it's called the age of Montesquieu. He is going to argue that a constitutional monarchy and a liberal government exist with replacement of estates. Okay? And we get the Declaration of Rights of Man. For phase 1, there's the Enlightenment right there. Phase 2, the age of Rousseau. We're going to see the social contract expressed Republican views, popular sovereignty. Christianity should be replaced by a civil religion. Okay, so those religious freedoms. General will of the people. Those ideas were adopted not only by the Republic but also by the Committee of Public Safety. And then our third phase, the period of Voltaire, 1799 to 1815, Voltaire had argued, Brandy was Voltaire, and she said this, right, in our Socratic, for enlightened absolutism. He had seen the horrors of what tried to happen if there was not a leader in place, but he says they have to be enlightened. They have to embrace all of the values of their people. Okay, so we would definitely see this under Napoleon. Napoleon was attracted to Voltaire's updating of the philosopher king concept, and Napoleon believed he was bringing scientific government to France and to Europe. He believed he was an enlightened despot, and for most of the time he was. Although Napoleon's use of plebiscite had not been contemplated by Voltaire, that's public vote, nor would Napoleon's military campaigns been approved by Voltaire, so conquering would not have been approved. But he did believe that he was following Voltaire's Enlightenment ideals, and that is why the French Revolution is a watershed moment in European and world history. It is a time where the whole world changed and it will never go back. Okay, that's why the French Revolution is so important to what we're moving on to.